Decluttering isn't just about benefiting ourselves. I learned early on in this process that it could actually go a whole lot further than that. So let's talk more about that. Well, hello friends, I'm Mary Beth and welcome to At What Cost. Now, within the first sort of round of decluttering that we did in our house, I very quickly learned that what I thought was my someday was actually somebody's today. So the first area in our home that I decided to declutter was our children's clothes. We had a ridiculous amount of clothing. And when I got everything sorted out and what we were going to actually hang on to and what our kids were going to have in storage for some upcoming sizes, when all was said and done, and I was ready to take everything that we had collected out of our house for our kids' clothes, I had 11 48-quart totes of clothes, just clothes. Now, we had gathered all of that clothing because of a specific reason. So our three boys we adopted through foster care, and they had a clothing allowance that we ended up being able to benefit from twice. Because of the way that their case was in the fiscal year, we got a clothing allowance the first half, and then we got another clothing allowance when the new fiscal year turned over. I had to spend all of that money. I had to think about the future, and I ended up with a lot of stuff, which ultimately was a blessing for us, but eventually it really sort of turned into a burden. We had gathered up all of this stuff, and I did have several sizes ahead, but we had so much to store and so much available right then that it was not very often that I had to do laundry. Clothes would pile up and pile up and pile up, and then it would feel really overwhelming and I wouldn't actually be able to get it all done. It just was an absolute nightmare. And if you want to know more about laundry, I will link a video in the description below because I have talked about laundry quite a bit, and it can be a little bit of a hot take. So when it became time to pass this stuff along, I was really trying to figure out what I was going to do with all of it. I did not want to consign it because I did not want to do all of the work of tagging and like preparing everything and having hangers, and I just was not going to do that for 11 totes of stuff. And then a friend mentioned a foster care closet. That's when it occurred to me that all of this stuff that I was saving for someday was actually something that someone needed probably today, if not tomorrow. If you know anything about the foster care system, you know that most kids coming into the system have nothing. They have the clothes on their backs, and the clothes that are on their backs may not actually even be all of that great for them. That was certainly the case for us, and having that clothing allowance provided was a tremendous help. But not everybody benefits from that, and we still have the need to be able to clothe children. So the thought that the things that I was storing for my someday could actually benefit somebody today changed a lot of the way I thought about decluttering our home. The first was that things became easier to part with. When I realized that what we were donating was something that somebody was actually going to be able to use, it became much easier for me to part with things. So I told you about the foster care closet. We had another instance sort of early on in this process with a friend who was setting up some temporary housing for people who were going through cancer treatments and just needed some place to stay for the short time that they would be in our area to receive those treatments. I had several household goods that they needed, and so I was happy to donate dishes and mostly kitchen stuff, but it really gave me a clear connection of who was going to be able to benefit from the stuff that I was just saving up for some time, or maybe just wasn't even using all that much. Another way that this idea really helped was in my view of hospitality. So not only was I tuning in to some of the more physical needs of our community, like someone who needed a car seat that I just happened to have an extra one of, or even a crib. We've donated quite a few things to people, especially when it comes to kids. But this sort of tuning in to the physical needs of others around us in our community really encouraged me to tune into the spiritual needs too. I was way more willing to invest in others, to have people into our home, and to really extend that hospitality because I was getting rid of things. I had more bandwidth to be able to engage with other people. I had some clarity, and because I was tuning more into the physical needs of those around us, I just naturally was building community. I was looking for ways to seek out hospitality. Now, part of venturing into family minimalism had a whole lot to do with our faith. As I was extending this hospitality and really looking for community and seeing the needs of others, I just naturally started putting others first. And that was doing a whole lot to me just spiritually. It was creating a sense of humility that I really needed to help loosen the hold that my stuff had on me. Having less stuff freed up time for prayer and time in God's word. Of course, having actual events in our home that I could extend hospitality, and ultimately being able to share these kinds of messages with you. I also started to realize that a lot of the things that I perceived as my someday needs were actually not all that accurate. After I donated all of those clothes, our kids never did without clothes. So thinking that I needed to save all of these things so that I could save money or I could have exactly what I needed in the future, we still were provided for, much like the way I was able to see someone else be provided for when I was donating things like a car seat to somebody who really needed one, or clothes to a child that they had just had a placement for. Focusing less on my someday kinds of needs and looking more towards the needs that someone has today reminded and encouraged me of just how much God provides for us. In a world of 2-day shipping and 2-hour pickup or delivery, I can have just about anything delivered to my house in less than 2 days if I really needed it. Living in that kind of world can really cause us to take for granted how much God provides for us when we stop trying to provide for ourselves. I also learned just how well our needs had been met, which again, in a world of 2-day shipping where marketing is constantly telling us that we need this or we need that to solve this problem or solve that problem, I started to have the realization that our needs were actually a lot better met than I thought they were. And I didn't need quite as much stuff as I had. It reminded me of just how much I need community and how much people were there for us when we needed them to be. Now, I am sure that you have also heard that things are so accessible to us that keeping things like baby gear and all of these other things that tend to be pretty readily accessible, that we shouldn't hang on to them because we can get them from somebody else. Well, somebody has to be the somebody else. If we're not willing to part with any of these things because we're convinced that someday down the road we may have another child, and how on earth would we find another baby seat? Well, spoiler alert, there's actually more bouncy seats than babies these days. And if you're willing to give, then somebody may be willing to give to you in the future too. Now, if you're curious about how you too can meet the today needs and extend hospitality to someone in your community, I would love for you to watch the video right up here. We are going to talk all about how hospitality can fix the epidemic of loneliness that we all face. Thanks so much for watching, and until I see you again, keep fighting the good fight.